here again. We move to the Renaissance, and abnormal behavior is caused by a sickness of the mind. So you kind of see that, you know, the historical perspective is moving in circles, right? At first it was the devil, and then it's physical problems, and then it's the devil again, and then, oh wait, no, but your mind is sick. And so that's when we see the beginning of the first asylums. In the 19th century, since the 1800s, mental illness was seen as a treatable sickness. And so the addressing of it was rooted in respect and humanity and moral guidance. In the 20th century, it goes from somatogenic versus psychogenic. Does anybody know what either of those two words mean? I know I speak fast, so if I'm going too fast for you, please tell me to slow down. But is anybody familiar with somatogenic or psychogenic?
No, miss, but I can take a guess.
Go ahead, take a guess.
The somatogenic would be like the example you're giving about medical conditions, changing behavior, and psychogenic would be more mental and connected with the brain.
Yes, so somatogenic is based on your physiological being, right? It's about your body, right? So, you know, you'll hear people talk about something is psychosomatic, right? So it's your mind causing a manifestation in your body. So somatic has to do with your body being problematic, whereas psychogenic is, yes, it's what's going on in your head, right? You might have there's an actual like defect in your brain, or there's there's like a genetic issue, or there's like an actual cause that's psychological or psychiatric in nature, okay? So I've left the 21st century blank because the 21st century is where we live. Yes.
Are you speaking like a chemical imbalance?
Yes. Well, chemical imbalance would be somatogenic, right? Because the chemical imbalance is physical.
Right.
Right? That has to do with your body.
Physical.
Physical?
Right. Somatogenic has to do with your body. Whereas the psychogenic has to do with your mind. And so in the 20th century, as they were looking at abnormal behavior, the question became, is it one or the other, or in some cases, is it both? And in some cases, it can be both. Like, again, I gave the example of syphilis. There are some viruses that are physical, right? Like when you have a virus, that's a physical issue. But that physical issue can also then cause psychological issues. And so when we're looking at abnormal behavior, your question always has to be, what is the root cause of this? Is it because is there a virus that's causing an impact on your body? Are you lacking particular vitamins? Like, you know, if you don't have a lot of vitamin D and vitamin B12, that can manifest itself as depression, right? And so there are physical issues that can manifest as psychological problems. But then there are also issues that are strictly psychological problems that do not have a basis in a physical abnormality. Are you guys with me? Yes?
Yes.
Yes,
All right.
yes.
And so the 20th century started looking at the relationship, you know, is it physical versus psychological? They're looking at the value of their diet, and then they're taking a more holistic approach. And a more holistic approach is thinking about, you know, what is the environment that this behavior is taking place in? Is there something that's in the environment that's causing a particular kind of behavior to occur? And so that's kind of what we've been looking at in the 20th century. It's the 1900s. Now we're 2 decades in the 21st century. And why do you guys think that's blank?
Because it's
just
21st century not finished yet.
Yes, the 21st century is not finished yet, for sure. And also,
so I think that the things from the 20th century that have continued into these 2 decades that we've experienced. So we haven't added anything as yet.
that's why it's blank. We haven't added anything as it. A century is a whole heap of time, right? It's a whole 100 years. And so, as you can see, over the past 2,000 years, there's been an evolution in how it is that we approach mental health issues. But as you can see from Greek and Roman times with Hippocrates, we have already gotten to a place of recognizing that abnormal behavior can be a result of physical problems, but it also can be a result of a sickness of the mind, like in the Renaissance. And so, as psychologists, as practitioners, as people who work with other people, even in the creative arts, you have to be able to look at people holistically and think about what is the everything that is taking place, because it's typically not one or the other. All right, so now we're going to be looking at different theories. If I were in your physical shoes, I would take note of these different theoretical perspectives, and I would take note of these theoretical perspectives because as long as you continue to do this kind of work, you will always see these names and these overarching topics. Like Dr. J is a cognitive behavioral psychologist, so that means she has studied behaviorism in depth, and fully of her work is based on these principles and her interventions. So John Watson, his focus is on measurable, observable behavior. All right. This is what you can actually see. So he's also known for introducing us to conditioning. There's two types of conditioning. There's respondent conditioning, where we learn through association, and there's classical conditioning. Well, let's look at this. Let's look at this picture here. All right. So what do we see? We see this unconditioned stimulus, which is the food, and the dog has a response, right? Nobody trained him to have this response. He's just looking at the food and his mouth is salivating. The stimulus is this bell, the whistle, and he has no response to this bell, to the whistle rather. Over time, or during conditioning, we blow the whistle, give him the food, and what happens? He's going to have the salivation. Why? Because it's associated with the food, which is what was happening before. After conditioning, because now we're conditioning him to respond to the bell, to the whistle. After conditioning, once he hears the whistle, he's starting to salivate. And he's starting to salivate because he's learned to associate the sound of the whistle with the food. Does that make sense? Does anybody have a question
Yes,
about that?
makes sense.
All right. So this is the famous Pavlov's dog. This is, I mean, you guys are in undergraduate psychology, right? No, Pavlov's dog is like the most proper example of responding conditioning that possibly exists. And it's something, can you guys think of examples where this happens? Can you think of examples where you guys have associated things and have been conditioned to them or have made
Like
observations?
when you're in school and the bell rings, it's break time, it's lunch time, it's time to go back to class.
So what happens when you hear that bell? You get up and you get up and move. So yes, you're right. We're conditioned when you hear the bell. When you hear a certain kind of bell, you get up and move, right? When you hear the lunch bell, you get up and move because you know it's lunchtime. When you hear the fire alarm bell, you get up and you move because you know that there's a fire coming, right? So we've all been conditioned that when we hear certain kinds of sounds, we associate it with a particular kind of thing. For me, it's 11:30 and hungry. In my classroom, the children eat lunch at 11:30 and I eat lunch with the children at 11:30, and no matter where I am, no matter what I'm doing at 11:30, I am hungry because my body is accustomed to eating at that time, and I have been conditioned to eat my lunch at 11:30, and I just need to eat at that time because that's the time that I eat. All right, so that's responding conditioning, looking at John Watson. So behaviorism examines forms of learning based on rewards and stimuli. Are we familiar with rewards and stimuli, class of 9?
Yes, miss.
Yes, ma'am.
Why, Dr. J, this group is very quiet. I said I'm always quiet.
Miss a evening now.
I mean, fair enough. Fair. Yes, it is
Yeah,
evening.
but respond. Respond. Have a conversation, guys.
Fair enough. All
Share that you
right.
have the information
Miss,
in mind.
it is coming, but slowly, but
Slowly.
surely.
Okay. Slow and steady wins the race. All right. So counter conditioning is to unlearn something by pairing a trigger stimulus with a new response. And this is something that you see in school with children and stickers, for example, right? If kids are behaving, well, lots of parents use this for potty training, which is not necessarily ideal, but if the child uses the bathroom, they get a sticker. And so that's a way of like conditioning them to do a thing in a particular kind of way because they realize if they get the bathroom, because if they go to the bathroom, they get a sticker. Counter conditioning is a way of unlearning behavior. So if you have a child who is maybe never putting their chair under the table, for example, right? And you want them to put their chair under the table when they get up from the table, then you would give them some kind of stimulus so that every time they do it properly, they associate doing the thing you want them to do with whatever it is that they're going to get. No, there are different ways that this happens. One of them is aversive conditioning. That's to reduce behavior by giving an undesirable result. And so most Jamaicans are accustomed to aversive conditioning because none of them like get beaten. And so all of us know what it is, that behavior it is that our mother or father does not like, that is going to result in a slap. And therefore, you don't do the behavior because you don't want the slap. And that is a way of reducing behavior, right? I think that is something that all Jamaicans are familiar with, or even in school, you see it in the classroom all the time. Another kind of treatment is using tokens. And tokens is closer to the sticker conversation that I was having with you before. So tokens are given for when students or when individuals do the desired behavior and then they can later exchange them. So that can look like coupons, that can look like candy, it can look like any number of things. But these are ways that you can get people to change behavior through associating a behavior with some other kind of thing that they want or that they're interested in. Anybody can take a guess as to what exposure therapy means? Anybody have an idea?
Means would it be a situation where, for example, you fear something for roller coaster and as a form of therapy that you go on the roller coaster repeatedly over a period of time, like you expose yourself to?
That's exactly what it is. You would do it in steps though. Like you would know so somebody afraid of roller coaster and then the first thing you do is take them and put them on one. Because that might cause judgment. But you would slowly introduce the concept that they're afraid of. Okay, so it creates opportunities for people to engage what they're avoidant of. So if somebody's afraid of roller coasters, the first thing you do would probably take them to a theme park to look at the roller coaster. And then the next thing you would do would be to take them up the stairs so that they can be closer to it. And then you would have them go sit in the chair but not actually go on the ride, right? You would slowly work your way up to creating that. And there's three primary types of exposure therapy. One of them is systematic desensitization, which is what I just talked about, systematically, slowly desensitizing them to it. Virtual reality exposure therapy, which is exactly what it sounds like, using virtual reality as a way of introducing them to it. VR is a really trippy kind of therapy because um, it's a virtual reality. Like it feels like it's real, but it's not. And for some people, it kind of tricks your brain into thinking that you're actually in the situation. Um, and what do you think flooding means?
Flooding is where you just immerse them fully. So you don't do it in a systematic way how you explained in the beginning, but you just throw them into the deep end and hope they
Basically,
survive.
and hope they survive. So if somebody's afraid of spiders, instead of introducing them to one spider, you just take them to a spider farm and put them in the middle of the room and just, there you go. All right, so these are all treatments that can be used by behavioralists to adjust abnormal behavior or to change abnormal behavior. Okay, and so now we have humanism. So the main idea behind humanism is that people are inherently good, right? And if they're given the opportunity to sit with themselves, um, they'll eventually be able to figure things out. And human interaction is based on free will. So basically, people don't do what them don't want to do. Um, the idea of talk therapy is deeply rooted in the idea of humanism, because if you don't want help, then you're not going to get help, right? And I'm sure all of you have a friend or two who just had ears, and no matter how you try to tell them that they shouldn't do a thing, they don't really pay it no mind, because they have free will, right? And so if they don't want to listen, they don't have to, and you just kind of deal with the consequences. So Carl Rogers is a very prominent figure in humanism, and he believed that unconditional positive regard and nurturing high self-esteem and developing a positive self-concept is a very important component of therapeutic intervention. Another well-known figure in humanism is Abraham Maslow, and Maslow is known for his hierarchy of needs, where basically you have to meet your most basic needs before you can move up this hierarchy, okay? And so the ultimate goal is self-actualization, which is having a fuller awareness of yourself. But you're not going to get to that place unless your basic needs are met first. Can anybody tell me, have an idea what these basic needs might be?
Yes. Like he has a pyramid. The most basic is like shelter, food, and like those stuff.
Food, shelter, and clothing. Nobody can be considering or thinking about their mental space if them hungry, right?
Yes, that's psychological or something. So
Exactly.
then
So,
there's safety.
mm-hmm.
So like security, like whether it's through your workplace or your family or property or housing or whatever, but safety in terms of that aspect.
Exactly. And so so this pyramid for him, again, it's fundamentally based in this idea that when people are able to have their needs met, then they're in a better position to then give consideration to their mental space and their mental well-being. But you can't be concerned about, managing your depression if you also have to navigate making sure that you have to be able to pay your rent or buy food, right? And so this idea is that in order for you to be able to become more aware of yourself and become a little bit more connected to who you are, you need to have those base levels. The bottom part of the pyramid has to be stable. Ooh. So humanism kind of has these four primary pillars. You focus on the present instead of the past. You focus on the conscious instead of the unconscious. Humanism also holds the person accountable, and it promotes growth rather than a cure. So the idea is that you're going to deal with what's in the here and now, right? You can't unbake a bread. If you don't put all of the ingredients together, you can't now take it apart, right? And you also focus on behaviors and things that you are consciously aware of. So there are things that are happening in our subconscious that we're not necessarily totally aware of. And so you're being held accountable for what is done versus what you're thinking about or versus what is unconscious. And again, it focuses on growth rather than trying to fix, right? Because there's this idea that, humans are growing. We're ever evolving beings. And as a result of that, you're not trying to fix anyone more than you're trying to grow from one place to another. So the humanistic approach includes client-centered therapy, which is where the client and the therapist work together to co-create their needs. And the therapist, their role is to mirror what the client brings to the table. And so if I come to you and I'm concerned about my relationship with my child, your job as a therapist is not going to be to say, well, the problem isn't your relationship with your child, the problem is really your relationship with your parents. Your job as a humanistic therapist or taking a client-centered approach is to look at what the person is bringing to you as their challenge so that you can help them address it. Because again, the goal is self-actualization. The goal is to help them have a greater awareness of what their challenges are. And so even if you as a therapist recognize that there's some deeper rooted issues there, you operate from the point that they give to you and then help that process, help them become more aware of themselves. So the therapist listens without judgment and with as little input as possible. Therapists are encouraged to show genuineness, and this then in turn allows the patient to open up. It also utilizes active listening, and so that is just, I really feel bad about how my son talked to me yesterday. So what I'm hearing is that you don't feel well about how your son spoke to you yesterday. How does that make you feel? Right? That's active listening. Also showing unconditional positive regard. So that's listening without judgment. And I know that can be very difficult. But one of our jobs as therapists or as people who work in client-centered spaces, even if, is this, Dr. J, is this your dance group?
What dance group?
The
No,
dance movement?
no, these are our visual arts. These are visual arts.
Ah, ooh.
Prospective visual art educators. So they're actually educators in the making.
Ooh, that's even more exciting. You guys are teachers. All right. I would have had a different approach if I knew this was a visual arts group. All right. Okay. All right. Now I'm excited. I mean, I was excited before, but the visual arts is even more encouraging. Okay. So all of you guys work on a regular basis with expression through visual arts, right? It's a very creative process, but it's also a very personal process, correct? Right?
Yes.
Creating your art is very
Yes,
personal. Okay.
definitely.
It's very, very personal. And so, when you're working with your students, there's going to be stuff that might come up in their art that you might be surprised by or shocked by or maybe don't necessarily understand. And I'm sure that happens when you guys do your work right now, right? Like I know at the end of the year, you guys have your exhibits and you get the opportunity to kind of see what people are working on. And then you guys have discussions around, what the meaning is and what the genesis is, right? Like where is this coming from? What space was I in? When you're doing this kind of work, that unconditional positive regard is very, very, very important, because I know that when you guys create your work and you put it out there, your intention is to put it out there, but not for it to be judged, right? Like you're sharing it because you're sharing a part of yourself and you're sharing a bit of who you are and a part of your journey and a part of your story. And so in doing so, it's no different than what we do as professionals, as clients, therapists, or as, again, educators. You're going to hear things, you're going to see things, and it's our job to have just complete and total positive regard. Like, thank you for sharing that. Thank you for taking the time to express that particular thing. Thank you for showing me that particular thing. Thank you for giving me deeper insight into who you are by sharing that, because it's a very difficult process. Paraphrasing what you hear, seek clarification, and reflect on what you're hearing. In your cases, this would be, paraphrase what you hear from them, seek clarification based on what you see, and reflect, right? Reflect on the feelings that, you're hearing from the person as they share their work, and also what they tell you it means. Oh my goodness, you guys are educators. Woo, this is fun. All right. So sociocultural theory. To understand abnormal behavior, you have to think about the social and cultural forces. You cannot, you always say, or you might hear, you can take the person out of Jamaica, but you can't take Jamaica out of the person, right? No matter where Jamaicans go in the world, people know them is Jamaican. No matter what them they. No matter what them they. You can't hide. That is just what it is. And it's the same for all of us, right? Jeanette, are you from Trinidad? Was I correct in hearing your accent?
No, but a lot
No?
of people,
Where are
Jamaicans
you
think
from?
Trinidad,
Guyana?
Lucia.
St. Lucia? Huh.
Yes.
You don't
Same
sound
thing.
like the other St. Lucians I know. My
Well, they
apologies.
fix
I'm not familiar with a lot of you all. They have a richer Creole, man. But it's probably because you're around all of us. I'm sure you sound a little bit different when you're home. But I say all of that to say that no matter where we are, there's there's something about our Caribbeanness, there's something about our African centeredness, there's something about just who we are as people that manifests and translates no matter where we go. And so it's very, very, very important that no matter who you're working with, in as much as you have students who are all Jamaicans, we're all on this call right now, we all know that there's no one, just like there's no one singular St. Lucian identity, there's no one singular Jamaican identity, just like there's no one singular Caribbean identity, right? All of the islands might be similar in some ways, but there are also some ways that are very, 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 very different. And so when you're thinking about abnormal behavior, you cannot divorce the person from where they come from. So Leo Vygotsky, he talked about the social cultural theory of development. And for him, social learning comes before cognitive development. And children construct knowledge actively, and they construct this knowledge through their interactions with people that are around them. So children learn what is socially acceptable based on what they're seeing. The zone of proximal development is the area where students are cognitively prepared for something, but it requires some help and social interaction to fully develop. And so, for example, they might be ready to, they've been cooking, right? Or not cooking, they've been like pouring cereal, or they've been, getting fruits for themselves. And so they're ready, they're cognitively ready to start preparing to cook, but they still need some assistance and they need some more social guidance to help them how to do that. And so this picture kind of shows us is a visual of the zone of proximal development. What's inside the green circle, I can do that by myself. Me don't need nobody to help me, I could. What's in the pink circle is I can do this, but I need a little bit of help to do this. And what's in the blue circle is I can't do this even with help. As educators, our goal is to identify what's in that pink area so that that pink area can eventually become green, right? We don't want to do anything in the blue area, because what's in the blue area, even if you can, even if you help them can't do it, that's just going to cause frustration and irritation. We want to stay in that pink zone. That's the most important place for us to be. And so, simple example, if you have a child who's working and they know the primary colors and they're like, all right, great, you know what the primary colors are, I can do that by myself, then they're ready to learn secondary colors, right? Or at least color mixing. You can teach them color mixing because they can now mix the blue and the red, and they can mix the yellow and the blue, and they can start to get these other colors. That doesn't necessarily mean though that they're ready to jump to tertiary colors, right? Because if you haven't done the blending, if you don't understand how the colors mix, then just because you know red, blue, and green, or red, blue, and yellow, don't mean that you can now understand shades of blue, right? Does that make sense?
Yes, miss.
All right.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I need to hear the like feedback just so that I know that like you're getting the references that I'm getting.
Yes, miss.
All right,
It
all right.
just takes a while to unpause the mics. That's
You
why.
can shake your head, or give me a thumbs up. The thing make a thumbs up, don't it? Oh, Dr. J, them can thumbs up. You can give me a thumbs up, man. You don't have
I
to like.
think
You can,
yeah,
if you.
they have their reactions thingy.
Yeah, you guys can. You can give me a reaction. You don't have to like a verbal reaction, but I can get like a, or a, I won't think it's a question. See, there you go. I like the thumbs up. I appreciate you. See, you're making my life easy. All right, Joel. Big up yourself. So this is
Somebody raised
Vygotsky.
their hand. Hang on.
That was me. That was me.
Oh, okay.
Because I can't do a thumbs up, but I can
Okay.
do a raise hand. So that's the zone of proximal development. You guys understand where we're going with this and how that impacts you as practitioners, right? Our goal always is to stay in that pink area, and that pink area is largely determined by what we've been exposed to in our homes. It's so for some of you, might live on campus, some of you might not live on campus, but for those of you who are not living at home with your parents anymore, there might be some things that you've never had to do until you've been on your own, right? And so maybe you never know how to cook rice because your mother always used to cook rice. And so that's one of those areas that's probably in the pink area for you, right? I can't make curry goat to save my life, even with help. I'm in the blue area for curry goat. I don't think I'll ever get to the pink area. I don't try. But the point that I'm making is, you know, when it comes to thinking about how people learn, you also have to contextualize where it is that they're coming from. What is their home life? What is the cultural background that they're coming from? And what are the things that they would have had the opportunity to develop prior to being in the space? Another well-known proponent for the sociocultural theory is one of our own, Dr. Frederick Hickling. Have any of you guys heard of Dr. Fred?
Yeah, I heard the name.
Yes, miss.
What do we know about Dr. Fred? Nothing. We know nothing about Dr. Fred. We know nothing about Dr. Fred.
Nothing. I
We
just
know
hear the
nothing.
name.
We just hear the name. Oh dear. All right. So Dr. Fred was he ED at Bellevue, Dr. J? Was he executive director there, or was he just like in charge of programs?
I think he was at one point.
Right?
Yeah.
So Dr. Fred is no longer with us, but he was a staunch advocate for the development of therapeutic interventions that were specifically focused on the needs of Caribbean people. So in the 70s and 80s, when Bellevue was up and live, he would have the patients do dub poetry. He would have the patients do singing and songwriting. The patients were doing farming on the land at Bellevue as a way of taking into consideration what the cultural context was, right? So of course it makes sense that in Jamaica, if people are dealing with a psychological intervention, that you include creative art, because Caribbean people are inherently creative people. If it's not music, it's dance. If it's not dance, it's what the whole I want to do, which is art, right? That's just, pardon?
Sorry, go ahead. That's my phone.
Oh, that was you? Okay. Um, as Caribbean people, as African descended people, we are inherently creative. And so it only makes sense that if we are going to have psychotherapeutic interventions, that they consider what the needs are of Caribbean people. All of the other people that I have introduced you to thus far are white European men. Them don't know nothing about life in the Caribbean. Them don't know nothing about life in a sun hut. Them don't know nothing about dub, and them don't know nothing about dancehall. Them don't know nothing about poetry. Them don't know nothing about anything what we do on this side of the world. So how is it that we can look to a Vygotsky or a Maslow or someone who is completely out of our cultural context to tell us how to address what our challenges are? That's not to say that, you know, schizophrenia is schizophrenia, right? Like it manifests in a particular kind of way. It has a certain kind of period before it begins to manifest. There are certain signs and symptoms that are culturally universal, aka you see them all across the board. But at the same time, just because it manifests similarly across the board does not mean that the intervention will be applicable all across the board. And so Dr. Fred, for the better part of 4 decades, has been a very prolific figure in Jamaica and the Caribbean with regards to making sure that interventions that we use and the approaches that we take consider what our cultural context is. Some of you guys should consider art therapy. It would be awesome. So cultural competence looks like the clinician being cognizant of attitude, language, understanding of the client's culture, and having self-awareness. It also looks like knowing what the beliefs, the language, the attitudes of treatment, and the family background of the client is. It also means choosing a location, treatment, and using culturally adaptive processes and materials. So for example, as people who are in the Caribbean, if we're doing art therapy, does it not make sense to use found items and found objects? It does, right? Doesn't it make sense if you're working with young children to do dioramas for them to go outside and use trees, and leaves and sticks and stones and shells to create, right? Because that's where we are. So we can spend money to buy plasticine and to get all of these things that come from foreign, or we can use the resources that we have available, like clay, which is a naturally occurring substance where we live, right? Um, and so cultural competence means having the capacity to use and adapt our processes in a way that is culturally relevant. And then there's also community, right? Using support from individuals, education, recognizing stigma and attitudes, so that we can be more effective in the approach that we take to our interventions. So sociocultural interventions include increasing the therapist's awareness of cultural values. What does that look like? So again, I talked about there not being a singular Caribbean identity or a singular Jamaican identity, right? You know, the uptown downtown thing is real. The rural and town thing is real, right? There are things that people do in rural parts of Jamaica that people in Kingston don't do. There are things that people who live below halfway tree don't do versus people who live up Beverly Hills. It's just a completely there are similarities, but there are also differences. And so a good therapist, like a good educator, is cognizant of what those differences are, and they're also cognizant of what they are bringing to the table. You have to be aware of what your biases are. This is part of checking your privilege, meaning being aware of, you know, areas that you might not recognize as being a deficit for somebody, but is their everyday lived experience, right? So COVID has brought that to light with a lot of people in terms of just not having access to internet and devices, right? You know, the majority of you guys are in university. Come hell or high water, you have to have a phone or you have to have a computer to be able to go online, right? You've had to find a way to make that happen. But there are also students who don't have that access at all. And so that's a privilege that you have to be mindful of, particularly when you enter the classroom to facilitate, because you can't assume that all of your students have had crayons and coloring books. You can't assume that all of your children have paint. Like today was my art class for my students, and we were supposed to do a painting activity, and one of the children didn't have paint. And I was like, that was my fault for operating from the position that all 4-year-olds have paint. I don't have paint because I'm a grown up, but I just assumed that all of my children would have paint. They didn't, right? And so that's a way of just kind of, it was a reminder for me to make sure that I have more inclusive activities, aka only crayons and white paper, because not everybody going to have colored paper at their house, right? And so that's something that as educators you're going to have to constantly keep in mind in terms of what resources are available. um, Culturally, social cultural interventions always also pay attention to suppressed anger and pain, focus on raising the client's self-worth and defining goals that are consistent with life experiences and cultural values. What does that mean? What does that last one mean? Defining goals consistent with life experience. And can I please hear from someone that I have not heard from? It's not that I don't want to hear from you, I promise. I just would like to hear from other people as well, because there's more than 2 people in this class.
Internet Chinese.
Must be that. I don't know what we're going. But we're not moving until somebody answer me, so you know.
Let's go, guys. Okay, let's see. 18.
You see, I'm gonna make that project start call on people.
All right. So Abiba.
Abiba, talk to me. What does defining goals that are consistent with the life experiences and cultural values of the clients mean?
Miss, repeat the first part.
What does it mean? So we're talking about sociocultural interventions, right? So what does defining goals that are consistent with the life experiences and cultural values of the clients mean? So you're a visual arts teacher. You're preparing to be a visual arts teacher. What would that mean in the context of what you do?
I teach students how to do art.
Yes, that is what you will be doing. And how do you do that in a way that's consistent with their experience and their culture?
Give them activities that can relate to them personally.
Okay, great. Give me an example. What would that look like?
Um, like how you would be in high school and after your summer vacation, they're like depict your summer vacation in a drawing or something like that.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, that's where I was going. So when we're doing these kinds of work or this kind of intervention, again, you're trying to make sure that you're giving the students or you're giving your clients things that are relatable to their experience. None of us don't live nowhere cold. Well, I mean, I do, but not very, very cold. So you wouldn't. I know.
You forgot that you're not
I
in
did forget. I did forget. I did. Don't remind me. This is my life side. But you wouldn't, for example, give the children an activity where you're like draw or create use a diorama to create a mountain where people ski, right? Like that's not a thing. That's not consistent with anybody life experience or cultural value as a Jamaican person, right? Not while you're currently in Jamaica, right? That's just not, or anywhere in the Caribbean for that matter. But as Abiba said, something like use a drawing to depict your summer vacation, that's consistent with their life experience, right? And then it also allows them to express their cultural value. The defining goals piece is just making sure that as we're thinking about objectives for our clients or for our students, that we're setting things for them that are attainable, right? We don't want to set them up to fail by giving them a goal that is outside of their experience. And then another, and this is Dr. Fred 100%, the use of popular culture, music, drama, dance, art as an instrument for individual and group psychotherapy is critical. Like, I would encourage some of you to really consider art therapy, because A, we need more art therapists in Jamaica, but B, and most importantly, again, we're inherently creative beings. And a lot of times we don't necessarily get the opportunity to pursue that creativity, because the truth of the matter is, as much as we're creative beings, artists don't get a lot of respect. You tell your parents that you want to be an artist when you grow up, and they're looking at you like, how you going to pay your bills with that, right? That's just what it is. And so part and parcel of thinking about these different kinds of interventions is like, how is it that we can use these gifts and talents that people already have to help them self-actualize and help them get from point A to point B? Cognitive therapy. Who knows what this is? Remember, Dr. J is a cognitive behavioral therapist now, so talk to me. I can call name too.
Please do.
Anika. Anika, what is cognitive therapy?
Me a volunteer. Miss, I don't know, but it's Makwara, by the way.
Oh, I was like, who's volunteering? Okay, cool. Go ahead,
Would it be connected?
Is there a way to get rid of that echo, Makita? There's a serious echo.
Are you and somebody in the class in the same room?
Yes, miss.
That's why you need to go all the way down.
Miss, it took a while for me to, because the computer kind of freezing, but she can go ahead. I'll go after her.
No, but you see, we can't really hear Makita. Can we hear you
No,
now?
miss. Is it better now?
Not really.
Good.
I
Oh,
know you're
no.
trying. I know you're trying. I just don't want to lose you. Just turn
How
on,
about,
just turn on yourself a little bit more.
how about now?
Yes, but you still need to turn down your volume.
No.
Yes, that's better.
Okay, miss. I was
Stepping
gonna
out
say,
of the ceramics department. You still need to turn down your mic, my friend. Please, may I beg you?
I'm turning it down. No.
Yes, that's better. Talk to me. Talk to
Okay.
us.
I was saying, wouldn't it be connected to like ink black test, Herman Rorschach ink black test? So assessing the mind specifically.
What about the mind? What part of the mind? When we say cognition or cognitive, what we thinking about?
How one thinks and
Human
perceives.
behavior.
How one thinks, and then you'll jump in to talk about human behavior. Yes. So cognitive therapy is focused on thinking, memory, and internal thought processes. All right. Just how people think about stuff, how they're remembering things, and what your internal thought process is. All of us have internal thoughts. All of us have this running conversation that is happening in our head. I'm sure you guys as visual artists are also constantly, when you're creating, there's a vision that is in your head that you're trying to get out. You more than likely see in pictures, but sometimes you think in words, or you have these like thoughts that are happening all the time. Cognitive therapy focuses on irrational and dysfunctional thought processes because those can be the basis of psychopathology. Those irrational thoughts that you have could end up being the reason that you're manifesting as being problematic. So can anybody give me an example of some irrational or dysfunctional thoughts that I have not heard from yet? Anika, here we go. This is your question. What are some irrational or dysfunctional thoughts that people could have?
For example, suicidal. Um, hmm.
What is the irrational or dysfunctional thought that's making you suicidal or making a person suicidal?
Like for example, stress or certain things not going so right in their life, and it just cause big depression.
What are the thoughts? Remember, it's the thinking, right? We're thinking about how people think. So what are the thoughts that they're having as a result of this stress, or what as a result of what is going on?
Mm,
You want a friend to help you, Anika?
sure.
Go ahead, friend. Go and help.
I would use paranoid thoughts, saying that people around you or even your loved one that you should rely on would want to hurt you. I think those would have a different type of effect on you.
Yes, those would be irrational or dysfunctional thoughts, right? If you're thinking that people in your life are trying to hurt you and you don't have no reason to believe it, right? Like if there's absolutely no reason why all of a sudden you feel like your mother cooking your food and she want poison you. Like that is an irrational and dysfunctional thought. Anika, going back to your suicidal comment, what I want you to do, what I was trying to get you to connect to was more of these thoughts that lead to negative feelings, right? So this thought of, I'm stressed out because, I can't find a job, and because I can't find a job, I'm worthless, or I'm stupid, or I'm incapable of doing this particular kind of thing. You know, all of us at some point in time have had thoughts or just like, oh my God, why I can't get this together. But when it becomes irrational or dysfunctional, it becomes something that impairs your ability to function, which is what dysfunctional means. That's when we would start to be looking at a cognitive therapeutic intervention, right? Because then we need help with addressing those thoughts. So Piaget looks at cognitive development as being a process which happens as a result of biological maturation. And your interaction with the environment. So according to Piaget, there is different periods of cognitive development. And I have Joel. Can you read me Piaget's first period of cognitive development, please, from birth to 2 years old? What's it called and how does it work?
Right. Birth to 2 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Birth to 2 years old. Sensory motor. Uses sense and motor skills. Items known by use. Project performance learned.
Object permanent.
Sorry, object prominence learned.
Do my
2 years.
friends, hold on, no, I just want you to read the first one. Thank you. Do you guys know what object permanent is?
Yes.
What is object permanent?
So object permanence is where a child will learn or understand that when a object disappears or ceases to exist, like if you hide it, that it still exists and it's not gone forever.
So you guys see my phone, right? Object permanence is I put the phone over here and you know that it is not disappeared. Exactly as Janetta said, right? It is permanent. This phone is it's a tangible real thing and it does not disappear. You can't see it anymore, but it's gone. And so children typically learn that between 0 to 2. Now, object permanence is an important concept to understand in terms of cognitive theory, because if you have a student in your class who is 7 years old or 8 years old, and you're doing an art project with them, and you put the crayons away, and they have a fit because the crayons have now disappeared, and the crayons don't exist anymore, then this indicates to you that there's a challenge with how it is that they have developed, right? Does that make sense? 2 to 6 is pre-operational. So that is symbolic thinking and where language starts to begin to be used, and they're very egocentric. So this is where, children they're beginning to imagine more and they decenter themselves, which means they realize that the world does not revolve around them. So between 0 to about 4 or 5, kids generally think that the world revolves around them and nobody else is important. But as they start to play more and as they start to think more in symbols, which is why language is important, they're starting to read, they're starting to decode words, they realize that they're not the center of the world. Between 7 to 11 is known as the concrete operational period, and this is where they start to become more logical. So they're making more sense about things. So it's the rational interpretations are, oh, I don't see the phone anymore. You must have put the phone somewhere else. The teacher put away the crayons haven't disappeared. The crayons have now gone into the place where the crayons are kept. 12 to adulthood is formal operationals, and this is where we're thinking more abstractly and where you have a stronger sense of morality. In terms of abnormal behavior, these stages of development are very important because it helps you to have a better sense of where people are. So, you're talking about morality, which is thinking about things as being not just right or wrong, but recognizing that there's more of a gray area in between behavior, right? So, is murder wrong? Yes, murder is bad. But if somebody is trying to kill you and you kill them, is that bad? Like, is self-defense equally as terrible as murdering somebody and stealing them or breaking into their house and stealing from them? Like, no, you see what I'm saying? Like, you begin to have a higher sense of being able to see clearly through some of those issues. And so, again, when you're looking at abnormal cognition, when people are unable to think on that kind of level, it gives you a better sense of where these abnormalities are coming from. So Albert Ellis, cognitions always precede behavior, right? Which means, I'm sure you guys have seen this meme, if you think it becomes your words, and then your words become your actions, right? Or your thoughts become your actions. So with Ellis, it's once you are able to change your thoughts, then you'll be able to change how you feel about things, which will then change how you behave regarding certain situations. So for Ellis, the equation is activating Ellis events plus beliefs equal emotional consequences. So, can somebody give me an example of this equation in real life? An activating event plus a belief that leads to an emotional consequence. Who have we not heard from, Dr. J? We have not heard from Domain. Domain, are you here?
Tyrese.
Miss is giving me up is going on. I'm not sure if you're even hearing me
All
right
right,
now.
No,
it's kind of
okay.
lagging, so I understood that it's a challenge there.
That's a challenge. Who can we hear?
Katrina, Brianna, Hamilton,
We heard a little bit from Petrina. Where's Hamilton? Miss
Brianna,
Brianna.
Here, miss, I turned off my camera because my battery was dying.
That's okay, Miss Brianna. Can you give us an example of an event plus a belief equal an emotional consequence?
Repeat for me, please.
So we're talking about cognitive behavior. We're thinking about cognitions rather. Sorry, not behavior. We're thinking about cognitions. We're thinking about how our thoughts impact our behavior. So Albert Ellis says that our thoughts always precede our emotion and our behavior. So how we think about things happens before how we feel about it and how we behave. So can you give me an example of an event plus a belief that equals an emotional consequence?
So possibly a child knowing that their parents said they shouldn't take something, and they know that they shouldn't take it, but they still take it, and then they know that they'll be punished afterwards.
So the event is taking the thing. What's the belief that they have?
That they will be punished for it.
And what's the emotional consequence?
They'll be sad in the end, that they disappoint their parents.
Okay, all right. I will accept it. Thank you. So, as we look at cognitions and as we look at cognitive theory, we're looking at how these activating events and beliefs can lead to negative emotional consequences. So much like Anika was talking about suicide, an activating event can be losing your job, and the specific belief can be that you're worthless and you can do nothing well. And so then the emotional consequence is you having, you going into a depressive state or you going into a suicidal state because you already believe that you're not a good person. And so the events around you have reinforced it. The way that let's look at the interventions. So the cognitive interventions are rational emotional therapy, which is where the therapist challenges the irrational thought process, right? So Katrina was talking about, being paranoid about people in your family trying to hurt you, right? One of the goals of rational emotional therapy is to challenge that negative thought process and be like, all right, well, if she was trying to really hurt you, would she do X and Y of a thing for you? And if they really didn't care about you, would they be doing X and Y of a thing? Cognitive coping skills involves teaching social skills, communication, and assertiveness through instruction, role playing, and modeling. This is something that we do a lot of with children, particularly children who may be on the spectrum or who have different kinds of special needs, just to help to give them a sense of you can't operate from the position that everybody know everything, right? And so cognitive coping skills training is really direct instruction in how to say please and thank you. Or, doing opportunities where you role play, maybe being on the playground and learning how to share. And then cognitive behavioral therapy, which is what Dr. J does, is a very focused, goal-oriented therapeutic intervention where there's a hands-on approach to problem solving. And so the goal is to adjust and help people change their patterns of thinking, particularly the patterns of thinking that are behind their difficulties. And so when you have situations where people already have these negative thoughts about themselves, which then leads to self-destructive behavior. The goal of cognitive behavioral therapy really is to identify what those negative thoughts are, identify what the behavior is, and then come up with strategies to adjust the negative thinking so that you can adjust the behavior. So here is a brief synopsis of the 4 major theories that we looked at tonight. There's behaviorism, humanism, sociocultural, and cognitive, okay? If I were in your physical shoes, I would take a screenshot of this just so that you have it. Just because you will find that, do you guys have to take another psych class? Is this the only one you have to take, or do you have more?
No, miss, this is the only one.
Oh, really? You only have to do one. Fascinating.
I do have another psychology class.
Pardon?
I do have another psychology class.
You do not?
I do. All
You
of this
do?
I have one
Okay.
more.
All right. So if I were in your physical shoes, I would just take a screenshot of this. It's one of those things where even as you go on into your post school life and you start working with students, it will be good for you to have these theories to help when you see certain kinds of behaviors and to kind of remember what kind of approach to take. The work that we do and the work that you will be doing with students is going to be stretching you in a lot of ways, and I would recommend taking a humanistic approach to how it is that you consider some of what you see, aka being non-judgmental, and also making sure that you're cognizant of what the sociocultural context of your students are. You can't assume that because we're all Jamaicans, we're all Caribbean people, we're all Black people, that we all have similar experiences, because we don't. And so, does anybody have any questions for me? I don't think we're going to have time to do our game, which makes me sad, but probably better for you, seeing as you all are so quiet, but I should send it in.
How long is the
No,
game?
Let's do the game and no questions.
Let's do the game.
Yeah.
We can do some of it. We can do some of it. We can do some of it. But you see, the game presupposes that everybody was paying attention to what was going on. You see how that works? The game presupposes that everybody was fully paying attention and was here with me through this lecture. So while I pull it up, does anybody have any questions? Is there anything that kind of stood out to you? Is there anything that made you go, I never fully totally get that?
Only one question, miss. It's
Go
not
ahead.
really big. The part where you were listing like from the 0 to 2 and such, I recognize that each column and row had in different colors. I was wondering if that had some significant meaning to it.
No, the colors are just to emphasize it, because you guys are staring at a screen and sometimes you need a little bit of color to keep your eyes focused as opposed to getting you distracted. So, no. They weren't relevant to the specific content. It was
the
just,
way the pattern set up, it seemed like it had some kind of specific meaning to it.
that's because you're a visual artist, my dear. It's because you're an artist. So your brain is making that connection. But yeah, no, it was really just to break up the monotony of staring at the screen. I'm seeing if I can pull it up. But in the meantime, does anybody else have any other questions? Is there anything else that stands out?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Have you met anybody suicidal?
Wow.
Several.
Okay.
Over the course of my life and the course of working with Dr. Johnson.
Which one was the most impactful?
I mean, they're all impactful in different ways, because it's just interesting to see how people make sense of the world around them. And it's very humbling when you're in a position to provide support for people who are feeling that way. It's not easy. I think that I haven't been in a situation where I've had anyone who has attempted, because they've typically received an intervention before. But it's always difficult because you're always trying to ascertain what the level of seriousness is and what the level of danger is, particularly if you see the signs of just becoming more reckless. Because, when we think about suicide, we tend to think that people look a certain type of way, and they don't. What you will see when people are serious about it is they start saying goodbye to people, or they start writing letters, or sometimes they'll start to give away things that are very important to them. And so I would say, in my experience, all of them have been impactful, only because it's a scary situation, to be in. Like, you don't want to be the person who knows that somebody's feeling this way, and it's too late for you to try to do something.
Is there a difference between the genders when dealing with them?
I haven't had a huge difference in genders. Dr. J, I was gonna say, Dr. J, have you?
I was gonna share that actively within the past 72 hours. Past 72 hours, yes, I've had to deal with a male who was presenting as suicidal, and it's a scenario where he just reached a wall, having a level of hopelessness, and now I had to create what you call a triage. So, for example, if Celina is talking to me, let us say Celina, Ms. Cowan, is going through something, and maybe I just don't know the behind the scenes, and she decides to reach out to me. I'll be looking at the conversation and looking at certain keywords. I can't do this anymore. I don't want to be here. So there are certain.
I'm tired.
Yes, there are certain things that you look for, especially with a personality that's usually buoyant, usually resilient, maybe going through a period of stress. And so knowing the persona and knowing what was being said to me in the conversation was definitely a cry for help, a cry for solution. So I had to reach out to the person that I know would have been in their space, because that's another difficulty during COVID times. You can't just, get into the person's space because of the navigations of COVID. So we have to really get creative about that. Males usually are very drastic in their methods. I mean, suicide is still drastic anyway you take it, but a male tends to want to
be more violent in their drasticness,
and they want to take care of it right away. So they may use a gun, something that there's no second thought. I'm here, I'm done, this is it. A female, you may see other signs before it gets to that full breaking point. And one of the things that you look for, well, like I said before, you look for that shift in the personality, how they're verbalizing what they're saying. You look for the ideation, because sometimes, you might have a bad day and it's, well, I don't really have those thoughts. I can't relate to that degree where once you're having the thought, it's a problem. And if the thought is consistent, that's a concern. Once we hear the person verbalize the thought, we take it very seriously, especially if it's a child. Once you hear, I want to kill myself, I want to do X, Y, Z, I don't want to be here anymore. No, there's verbalization to thought. When you're hearing planning, I'm thinking of doing X, Y, or Z, and there's a plan, it means that it has now moved from verbalization to deeper thought to planning for execution. Those are signs that we look for. Ms. Cowan talked about intervention. Usually the first time we hear it is when, if the people and the community around are aware enough to know that, look, you know, this is not just something you say, they may reach out and you get to intervene. If you don't get to intervene and the person, you sometimes in a community that's not very aware, you might hear a person say, boy, I just want for dead. I just need for dead. You know, things like that. And you get used to hearing that, but not realizing that there's a whole thought process going on behind that. And that person might really be in trouble and need some intervention. And then there may be an attempt. Usually we get a very communal response or aggressive response when there's an attempt that failed, you know, the attempt, the rope around the neck, that type of thing, or anything at all, the cutting of the wrist, anything at all, but it has failed. That's when sometimes in a community you will know, oh, you know, this is serious because they really try to kill
you really try.
And it wasn't successful. So we really need to figure out how to help this person. But there are layers. And so with the females tend to cut their arms, you know, and when you're in a state of, when you're suicidal, you would have gone through a cycle of, you know, really receding from reality in a particular way. I always talk about having the round hole. If you notice my hands, there's a wider perception and vision. You have an idea of the future, you know, the things you're going to do tomorrow. You have a plan, you're looking forward to something. So even if things are stressful around you, you kind of have the, you know, a vision of something moving forward. When it is suicidal, it gets to a pinpoint where you can't see nothing else but not being around. You think not being around is a solution. And so that's how you know as well when somebody say, yeah, I'm not need for the year no more and I'm tired. That will send off bells for my ears, and I'll go, huh, what kind of vibe? But you will see differences in how the males present, because socially our males are taught to hold their emotions in and not express them. And when they express them, it is very well expressed, you know, to the highest degree you are going to notice. And so I encourage males, even young males, when I'm talking to young boys, I encourage them to talk about how you feel, think before you act, you know, engage the brain before you actually carry out something, talk to the adults around you. The girls, they, as I said, they may be more expressive, and sometimes it doesn't flow in the normal way. Sometimes a child says nothing to no one, and you just see them go off by themselves, and they're usually more, so we also have to pay attention. Sometimes all the clues that we look for just don't present.
Don't show up.
Right? And so, you know, you hope that a community around any person feeling in that state will see something and do something, because sometimes we're so normalized with the deviance and the things that are not absolutely normal that we just think it's the norm, and it's when something happens we respond. So,
and if you hear those verbalizations, reach out to someone. Like if you hear with someone in your community and you don't know who to talk to, check in with Dr. J. Like don't hear it and take it lightly, because sometimes people do say it to vent, but sometimes people also say it to gauge and get a reaction to see.
Right, to see.
Like, do you actually care about me enough to stop me or to do something? Because if there's already a negative cognition in their head, if there's already a negative thought process in their head around feeling worthless and feeling unloved and feeling uncared for, you know, if somebody says it to you and then you don't respond, then they're gonna take that as, see, Lord, me tell them and them
Nobody
doing business with me,
cares.
like nobody don't care, nobody not respond.
Right.
So, you know, whenever you hear it, you just need to be like, look, I know you're going through a rough time. I'm here for you, and then reach out to somebody else. Reach out to a professional if you can. You know, Dr. J is always around.
I usually say if you call me or miss, because sometimes it will take a while for me to get back, especially if I don't know, it's just the norm. So I may not get to that message right away. I usually say find a way to talk to that person, find a way to get to somebody in the house.
In the house. Make sure we call the mother, call the auntie, call the cousin, call the sister, another friend who live close by to go check them.
Right, you know, so I was able to reach out. This example of this is a grown person. I was able to reach out to somebody in their circle and say, listen, and that person was able to validate my concern. And this was just one conversation I was having. And I'm like, so looks all right. And so when I reached out to the person in their circle, they were able to say, yeah, they've been themselves. You know, they're not, I've been trying to talk to them to kind of make them, you know, just be okay because a lot is going on, the stress of this and the stress of that. So you never know what's going on with somebody. You never know where the thought process is. If there's a plan, you never know how far the plan is gone in the head, in the mind. So,
or if they've actually taken steps to put that plan in place too.
Right. So you just want to try to be that person to disrupt anything, disrupt the plan, you know, to execute if possible. And how you do that, if you know somebody, you know, I usually say it's because sometimes people live in very isolated situations, and you will say, so there's who's around you, and they really don't have anybody around them. That's when I say, listen, if at any point, if it is 12 o'clock at night, call my phone.
Call me.
Yes, I will say to them, give me a call if you need to, no matter what time it is. If you're having these thoughts and you feel you hit a wall and you can't go any further, call my phone. I give them that option so that at least there's a disruption in the plan, you know, in the thought process. I say, oh, she told me. And it has happened. This really has happened, where somebody remembers, oh, you know, she told me to call her. And the thought comes up to them when they're mid-stride trying to do something, and they pick up the phone and call. So, you know, we just have to do what we can because it's tougher in this time.
Especially now with COVID. We were talking about that. I'm not gonna have time for us to do the game, guys, but
I mean, you're not on you're not on next week, are you? I don't think you're on next week.
You know, tell them next week for them to do them exam.
Oh yes, next week is their exam. So we can have Miss Cowan come back. No, you see how they're laughing? They don't want this test, you know. If they don't have to do this test, they will escape this test until the semester done. And it's like, oh, we were supposed to do a test.
No, man, I need to go do the test on. We can do the test and then Miss Cowan can come back and play with them. Go and go do the work.
Yes, so we can organize that, guys, because I don't really know the game and I prefer her to facilitate it. So I'm gonna ask Jeanette to say thank you, please.
Oh no, it's stick.
It's stick, Jeanette. What stick?
Okay.
Yeah,
my screen has my screen has stick. Okay. On behalf of the visual arts students, future educators, visual arts students of Edna Manley College, I'd like to thank you so much. Is it Doctor?
No, I'm just Miss Cowan.
We're pushing her to that.
I proclaim it. Let's accept it.
Let's find the money for it.
We thank you so much. We thank you for your time, for taking the time out to come to us not once but twice and possibly 3 times, where you took your time to explain, ensure that we understand what was being explained and going in depth with it. We really appreciate it, and it impacted us. I'm speaking on behalf of everybody. Hopefully there's something I know in the entire presentation that must have impacted everyone in a different way, or something else may have impacted someone other than me in a different way as well. But all of us must have been impacted, and I'm thankful for that, and I'm thankful for your time, and I'd like to say thank you, thank you, thank you. I could say it in my tongue, merci, merci, appeal, merci, shy. All right.
I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for having me and for being attentive.
Thank you, Miss.
And
we will speak because we have.
Thank you, Miss.
You're very, very welcome, my dears. And yes, Dr. J, we'll powwow. We have a lot to powwow about.
Absolutely.
All right, gentle people. Have a good night, guys.
Thanks. Be well. All right, guys. So I think it's now 15 minutes to our close-off time. Are there any questions? The test, as I said, it's ready. I have it ready to go on Google Forms for you, for those who joined late. The plan is when we start next week is to send the link immediately, and then you will type your answers in a Word document so that, you know, I do expect that you have nothing around you that is going to facilitate any answers. I don't think you'll have the time because I'll be watching and facilitating, so you'll need to answer the questions. Any challenges or concerns before we close?
Nice.
All right, so let me see. Makira and Melissa policing.
Miss me too old. Miss, you know, see she policing me.
I know, that's why I said I mixed it up. I was supposed
Oh.
Makida, you're policing. You're too old to police, Melissa.
Too old for police. I should have come in. I'm not sure I'll go.
All right. All right. So we know what we should have been studying for this test. It's a quiz. Let me not say test because it's not a final exam.
Miss, how much questions?
It has about 4 sections. It's 100%, 100 marks. It has short answers in the first segment, and in the second segment, it has
Stop it.
Makira, don't. It's not even a test week yet.
Misha, she alone know all of the answer them. I used to share all on it. Stop it.
So the format, short questions are about 10 short answer questions, and in the second section you have like short answers, but
Miss, I missed some things because some people come and knock on my door. I'm sorry.
What am I supposed to
what I missed?
What
I realize it's the exam you're talking about, so I want to know.
So what am I sending you, Jeanette? Send you what?
Miss, whatever you said, I just wanted to repeat a little piece in whatever I missed.
Oh, okay. No. In terms of the format for the quiz, I said like the first part are short answers, definitions. The second segment is like medium level answers, and then it moves to maybe 2 essay type, not maybe, you know, not long essays, but you would have to maybe share at least 2 paragraphs of the knowledge based on the questions. It's 2 segments, the last 2 segments, you have the opportunity to choose. So you may have 4 questions to choose 2, or, you know, you may have 3 questions to choose 1, that type of thing. Guys, we're in college. We're supposed to be so savvy to quizzes and putting our information down on paper. I cannot deal with the trepidation I see on Melissa's face. It's not supposed to be that, you know?
I think there's some unrealistic expectations.
I am not, listen guys,
remember them
rise to the challenge and get 100%. But this is my assessment too, to make sure that after all these series of lectures that we're all on the same page, because if we're not all on the same page, we have to fix that before the end of the semester. Yes, Melissa.
All I have to do is ask me if I learn anything. I'm going to say yes, Miss.
Miss will try her best, but still.
Just review, guys. Review, because technically it is impossible to test on every single thing. But just like I say, make sure that you are at least savvy on 3 theorists. You know, your history of psychology, your history of education. Look especially the timeline on the development of psychology in the Americas. That all of those things that were sent in the group initially, Jeanette, You may want to share them for the new people if you can, because we should have that.
Yes, I have a phone.
Oh, so that you don't have the images. I'll have to look back in the group and see if I can repost some of that. The history of education is critical as well, because we did that. Your theorists, your first theorists, people who evolved out of that, because we have done quite a few people. So any questions, now is the time to ask them, because come next week, I'm not even going to talk before I'm going to say, okay, guys, do you have a Word document open for you to type the answers to send to me? You know, or I might set up a poll atmosphere for you to respond. I don't know. But just be ready to just type the answers to the questions that are posted. All right? No questions or concerns? I will bid you adieu until next week.
Yes, Miss.
Yes, a question, Domain?
Miss, I'm just concerned, like the connection thing, like how it's going to be done. Like,
You mean for
is
the
it
test?
just like, yes, Miss.
Well, it's gonna be pretty much like what we're doing. I'll just send you the link. Do you have a laptop or a tablet or something that you can type answers in? Yeah?
Yes, Miss.
Right, so pretty much you will get the link for the questions. All the questions, the test is already formatted. So I will post the link and then you open it and just proceed to answer the questions. Now, because we're not in a situation where we're in class and you're writing your answers, I will just talk about things like be mindful of how you're typing, make sure you number your questions, make sure your names and your ID numbers are at the top, and number your pages so that I'm not confused when I'm trying to read anything. Make sure your answers relate to the correct question in terms of number. If it's question 1, you're answering, you put question 1. Because my expectation is not that you will write the question over, right? Because it's not that you're able to have that. You will just be responding to the questions in real time.
How much time will we have to complete it?
The quiz is 1 3/4 hour. I most likely will give the full 2 hours for responding because there's something I need to tweak on it, so it might take a little longer. But yeah, so I'll give the full time, at least 1 hour and 45 minutes. If you're not finished, you'll get the time. Because of the nature of the process, you will get your full 2 hours to do it. If you finish before, great, you can go. Any other questions? Review, guys. And I will see you all next week. Thanks for showing up as per usual. Jasmine, you said you had another course. You said you're doing another course now, or you will do it again, do it in the future?
I have another psychology class in the mornings on Tuesdays. So I have that, and then at the end of your class.
So is it Psych 1 or what type of psych is it? Same thing?
No, it's psychology into art education or something like that.
This is the same course, so why are you doing
No,
it?
it's not.
No.
Jasmine, it's not psychology. It's not psychology. It's introduction to
What you talking about? Philosophy?
Philosophy
Yeah.
of art. It's different.
So you're mixing up philosophy and psychology, Jasmine?
Yes, yes.
Oh dear, is it the same type of content because we're going through the history of the things? Is that it?
In a way.
It touched on Aristotle. But apart from that, nothing else. Yes, Miss, and Plato, but apart from that, no, it's completely
Okay, so don't confuse it, Aristotle and Plato were the first philosophers. Yes. Recorded philosophers. So that's And then remember that philosophy evolved into psychology eventually, but because of the nature of trying to understand human behavior, the mind, and how what makes us tick, that's why philosophy would be the beginnings of the discussion as it relates to human behavior, what makes us think the way we think, what makes us act the way we act, all of that. So that there would be the correlation, but after that, be clear on everything else. Okay, Jasmine?
Yes, miss.
All right, guys, that's it from me today. Thank you, thank you. I have recorded this so that if anybody needs to go over this information, abnormal psychology tends to be, or it can be deep and intense in terms of the areas that we cover. So I record them so that you still have access to them. And my recording here is linked, it's linked to my page, so it's recording right now. All right, guys, so if there's nothing else, please do have a good evening and see you all next week for your test. I'll be dancing.
Bye.
I'll be dancing and watch you all pass. Okay, guys, bye.
Bye, Miss. Yeah.
Bye. Bye.